This is Macintosh. I should ask you what variety it is, if anybody could tell.
It's Macintosh.
Good answer.
I did it.
Yes. Macintosh are usually ready to be picked when they start falling from the trees. This is going to be your little conveyor, okay? So all you're going to do, pick the apple and you're going to set it on there.
Got it.
But you can move this to where it works best for you as you're picking. So Tami, you can hop on your platform.
Dalyville, Wisconsin, south of Mount Horeb, is where Munchkey Apples calls home. And Laura, the matriarch of this family-owned orchard, wasted no time putting us to work.
They're picking themselves, Laura.
If it hits the ground, is it done?
Yep.
Oh.
It's coming out of your pay, I always say. No.
Am I just grabbing what I can reach, pretty much?
Yeah.
All right.
You're supposed to get the bottom, she's supposed to get the middle, and I'm supposed to get the top.
Even if they're small, am I grabbing them?
Yep, one in each slot.
Apple production is an investment. Standard-sized trees can take up to 8 years to bear fruit, while dwarf trees take up to 3 years.
Most of these machines imported, or are they made in the United States?
This one's made in Denmark. They use these a lot in Europe because their orchards are smaller.
Okay.
And they have a lot of co-ops. It kind of is how they work.
Like every time I see a machine, it seems like it comes from Germany or Finland.
You know, we have a few very big orchards, but we're not like Washington State. The smaller equipment from Europe seems to fit us a little bit better.
This is so much nicer than having a 25-pound bag of apples hanging around your neck.
Exactly. There's more bruising that can happen when you do it that way.
Right.
How many people do you need to do this?
6.
6 people.
That's
and then,
it. Wow.
This thing you can pick 4 to 5 bins in 1 hour, and one bin holds 800 pounds.
Wow.
One year I had the high school football team come, and they came in shifts, and they picked, and then instead of paying the kids, it went to their football team, so that was like their fundraiser. And then this year I did it with the cross-country team. We got about a half a bin, 10 bushels. This is great. I get work out of you guys and you're making me supper. Here comes the rain. I did see a little lightning. They're packing Portland's right now, so you can help pack if you'd like.
I'll pack.
All right, let's go sort apples. Let David be here with Trish, and then Trish can babysit him. Yeah.
And I do need a babysitter. I'm going to spend this entire time just curating and bag for myself.
There are over 7,500 varieties of apples grown worldwide. Munchkey grows 14 varieties, and this fall harvested 170,000 pounds of apples. That is a lot of work.
Obviously, work doesn't end in the winter, but does it lighten up? Do you get like more downtime?
I do, except for I'd have more downtime if I didn't have the cattle. But yeah, it's pruning and kind of getting your act together for spring again.
Yep.
So
I would imagine like all the equipment and maintenance and...
You put so much on hold this time of year, but there'll always be something, you know.
Right. Oh my gosh, right?
So the beginning of August, we had a little bit of a hailstorm. And so now we have nicks on our apples. And it really hit our Honeycrisp hard since we have such a thin skin. And even depending on the trees, if they don't have much foliage, they didn't have anything to protect them. So really the west side, the winds were coming from the west.
Right.
The west side of the trees got hit hard. So it's been not as fun packing, and I haven't had as many nice Honeycrisps as I normally would. But we're gonna try to put some hail nets up next year because, yeah. It's just a real bummer. So.
Well, with weather becoming
Yeah.
more and more unpredictable and so severe,
Yep.
it sounds
And you know,
like a necessary investment.
Yeah, and I felt lucky that it wasn't that bad of a hailstorm. So.
Laura's farm became part of a weather station network in 2011. The weather station shares data with other orchards who can then use the calculations to decide when to do crop management.
The big black bucket there is my rain gauge.
Okay.
So that's just collecting the water. And then of course it's got the little windmill that's going to tell me the wind direction and the wind speed. Then the thing that sticks out there, that's just the solar panel for it. And so there's a lot of the diseases that are based on rain. And so, and how many hours that the leaves are actually wet makes a difference. And so you'll base your management decisions on that for like things like scab is a big one in this spring.
The device that measures the rainwater is a bucket that collects it?
Yep.
Does it also self like draining, or do you have to?
Yep. It's hard to make any decisions about anything in the orchard without a weather station.
Yeah.
It seems like so much yield is out of your control, what falls off of the tree or...
That's farming, right? There's only certain insects you have to worry about. One of them is coddling moth. This year, I used something called mating disruption. So we hung, see if we can find one here. You see those little black things on the orange? We hung those. It releases a pheromone for these moths, and they can't find each other. They get confused and they can't mate. And so they're not in your orchard. And I didn't have to do anything for those moths.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have
Is
those
that
hung out.
effective?
Yeah. It's pretty new, you know, but it worked really well. I mean, there's so many, it's so important to know your insects and how they work as to what you're going to do, because what we do is so selective, because we want to keep all the good insects in here.
Mm-hmm. I know where the squash is.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so let's go get it.
All right.
Like something I know. I'm so excited.
Let's grab some butternuts.
How much foraging do you do for the restaurant?
Most recently, the things I've been foraging have been wild plums have come into season, and our warmer, rainy weather, we've had just an amazing surplus of wild mushrooms. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Growing up, Tami's family taught her to seek out the bounty that the land around her had to offer. During harvest season, you can count on her bringing her foraged wonders into a restaurant aptly named Harvest.
I consider myself an advanced home cook. I don't consider myself a chef. I feel a little uncomfortable when people call me that. And the reason that I say that I'm an advanced home cook, because I had the advantage of growing up with grandparents that, growing up in the Depression era, were very much about preserving and putting up and cooking from scratch, and nothing ever went to waste.
Yeah.
We would be up at our property in northern Wisconsin, and of course they had all kinds of chores to do, so they would send us out to go find winterberry. And it just kind of blossomed into something that I absolutely love doing. So it's still in me. I'm 57 years old, and I'm still, waiting for the snow to melt so I can pick spruce tips, and I just go through the whole season and just pick and process. And I think it was literally just being around people who ingrained that sentiment into me. So,
sure. Hearing your background, I kind of long for those days. I think the world is changing, and I think the way we look at food is changing, and it's kind of coming full circle back to where people want that.
The other thing I want to mention too is, like, my grandmothers were just such a force. They were strong, independent women. My grandmother had a root cellar that I wish to God I had pictures of it, because it was like something from another planet. There were cabbages hanging from the ceiling, there were carrots buried in buckets of sand, there were tomatoes wrapped in paper so that you could go in her root cellar in February and pull out a red tomato. Just like all this like crazy stuff. Like, why aren't we still doing that, right? We take it for granted that we can just walk into a grocery store and buy a tomato any day of the year.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is. A lot of resources go into making sure that we can eat things year round, and it's unhealthy for us and it's unhealthy for the planet. So, cheers.
Tonight we're going to start with a fresh salad containing Munchkey's Honeycrisp, Cortland, and Blondie varieties, local grapes from Door County, toasted nuts, and a tangy cider yogurt dressing, complemented by a light, crisp Riesling.
Hey, you're drinking my cider.
Give me that one too. I'm sorry.
I'm teasing. Oh my goodness.
For the main course, a buttery, savory apple and squash hash with a rich braised pork confit and a full-bodied Pinot Noir. For dessert, we'll be having Tami's rustic apple galette. Its perfect simplicity accentuated by a freshly made whipped cream. I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. For dinner, we are joined by Laura's husband, Brad, and Amaya Atucha, a fruit crop extension specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I'm curious to know, like, what a typical day in your life is like?
I have like split appointment at the university. So I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Horticulture, but I'm also the state fruit crop specialist with the Division of Extension at UW-Madison. So my work involves extension, working with all the fruit growers in the state, doing research, which is a big part, and then I also teach.
Oh, wow.
The two weather issues that we worry about, frost and hail.
And you mentioned hail damaging a lot of your Honeycrisps because of the soft skin and that kind of thing.
I mean, we definitely won't have the good Honeycrisp crop that we should have.
Is that like an annual concern? Is it something that you think you can overcome or will overcome?
Well, this is the first year we've had hail, so we've been lucky because I know a lot of other orchards have been hit before.
I think that this is a result of climate change. Well, you had hail storms here and there, but now that they're becoming more often, that is basically making growing apples tougher, more complicated.
Yeah.
There's always an extra step, something else new, not only damaging the fruit, but then you can have damages to the limbs and the branches, and then you can get diseases because basically what you get is wounds all over the tree, and then when you have really wet weather like we're experiencing now, it's very humid and it's warm, that is very conducive to have more diseases. So it's not only that you are damaging the fruit, but it's also that you can end up with more disease problems.
When we talk about the challenges of doing this is the weather, and you mentioned your weather system that you have that you use to monitor and that other people can kind of pipe into.
Yep.
And it's my understanding that you're involved with the program that kind of distributes those.
The program, it's a network of weather stations. It's hosted at Cornell University. And I knew about this system and that they have all these models that you could use for different crops. And one of them was apples. And we got some funding to buy some of this weather station and participate in the whole system. And Laura was one of the growers that was fortunate to get one of those weather stations. And then you can just use your data to run models, whether it's for insects or for thinning or for irrigation.
Oh, that's invaluable.
Other thing that is great is that anybody can access that data. So if I'm Laura's neighbor and I have an orchard, but I don't have the resources to buy a weather station, because we're so close and we're experimenting basically the same kind of weather, I could just go online and click on that weather station and get all of the information and run the models and use that information. So it's actually any citizen, anybody can just go online and find weather information.
It can't be cheap. What does something like that cost?
The weather station
The weather-
is $2,000.
$2,000. So it's basically based on a Grantland University. So that's our mission.
Wow.
That is part of our mission, is to serve the growers of the state.
So for the consumers, what does that mean for the consumers, right? It's less spraying.
Yeah.
It's less chemicals put on their apples. Because now you're looking at mouths, in the old days it was all calendar spraying. It's like, oh, it's apple season, every week, let's run out the sprayer and kill everything that's in the orchard or put a spray on and protect everything.
It's not only more spraying, it's a higher cost of production as well.
It's so necessary. I don't think you can make any management decision without it.
One thing that people don't talk a lot about is apple varieties and fruit varieties, how more and more they're becoming more difficult to get access to, because either you need to become part of a club, or they are either coming up of a breeding program that is in your state, and because you're part of that grower group in that state, you are able to get some of that. So that's the case with all of the new varieties that are coming out of Washington State University. Wisconsin growers don't have access to them anymore.
Well, I feel like, Honeycrisp, I think because it was created in Minnesota, that we grow really great tasting Honeycrisp because of our climate and our soils. Because I know growers like in Pennsylvania, and they say, we can't get our Honeycrisp to taste as good as you. So all these other growers everybody's trying to look for the next Honeycrisp. And so Washington has put a lot of money into their Cosmic Crisp.
Yeah.
But they won't allow us to grow it here.
Only
And New York has a couple of new varieties too that they're only letting New York growers have.
So originally was that they filled a patent, and that would last for 10 years. But now all the apples have trade names that last forever. And so even if you can grow them, you cannot sell them under that name.
Interesting.
And so what's the point of growing if you cannot sell them that way? And so it's very competitive, and and I don't know what's going to happen. There's very few varieties that are being released, just openly released.
Okay, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
really
your
good.
apples. Of course it's me.
No, it's your cooking.
No,
And your cooking.
I didn't do anything.
Well, you
right?
put love into it.
I did.
It's delicious.
I know I feel confident I was loving the whipped cream while I was making it.